Hello and welcome to Angel's Costumes Behind the Seams. I'm Jeremy Angel.
And I'm Jonathan Lippman.
And I'm Richard Green. And today we are going to be airing my interview with Howard Burden. Howard's been around a long, long time. He says 30 years, and I take his word for that. And he's, I think, got some very, very interesting things to say.
That makes sense because I think I remember Howard as one of the costume team on a film called Diamond Skulls that Mary Jane Rayner costume designed.
Another Wimbledon man. Yeah.
We hope you've been enjoying these conversations. We've been enjoying your feedback. If you have any questions or queries, please send them to podcast@angels.co.uk. You can find us on our website, which is www.angelsbehindtheseams.com, or you can find us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are /Costume Podcast. And here is Richard's chat with Howard Burden.
Hello, I'm Richard Green from Angels Costumes, and today I'm talking to the costume designer Howard Burden. Howard, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you.
Good. We're structuring these podcast chats around a certain number of questions, and primarily it's both to entertain and to give people who are thinking of coming into the business or who are interested in the business in some insights and things. So the first question, fairly straightforward one, is how did you get into the business?
Well, I did a degree in theatre design at Wimbledon School of Art, and
Right.
did quite a bit of theatre, a lot of fringe theatre down at Chichester and King's Head and the Lyric Hammersmith. And I was working on an exhibition it was actually for Anne Beverley, who was married to John Bloomfield.
John Bloomfield's wife,
Yeah.
Of course, yes. And she taught at Wimbledon, didn't she, for a long, long time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did a couple of exhibitions. One of them, I think, was Six Wives of Henry VIII.
At Hampton Court?
No, it was Torbay or somewhere bizarre. And
Okay.
one, the Elizabeth, he did the Glenda Jackson.
Yes,
Elizabeth.
indeed.
But basically, in fact, I think you've still got a few of those costumes still in for England.
We have, and you can identify them because one of the things he did a lot, of course, was use bleach on velvets. So quite often, you'll know this, but quite often you can tell a John Bloomfield because it's got that sort of signature patina to it, if you like.
Okay. And they're slowly rotting, which is,
Well, yes, indeed, yeah. You bleach something and 50-odd years or 40-odd years later, it's going to suffer a bit. But,
I love that. And it was quite pioneering because they were all the jewellery and stuff was made out of nuts and bolts.
Yeah, and plug chains and stuff like that. Yeah.
It was terrific. So I was working with Anne on that, and a friend, another theatre bod from Wimbledon, was working there, and he happened to know someone at the BBC called Andrew Papadimitri. They were old friends from Wimbledon. And they talked about, they had this scheme in the past where you had sort of holiday relief where you could just go and, you either went into set design or costume, so on and so forth. And I applied. It was this sort of 3-month contract. And I applied and got the contract, which was brilliant. And in fact, I was probably there freelance. Well, I was there on contract for about 3 years in the end. And the first job I ever did was Much Ado About Nothing with lovely June Hudson.
Right. Yes. Because they kept you on for 3 months, and then they'd either extend it, or if the face didn't fit, presumably they didn't extend it. But it was possible to work at the BBC without being a BBC employee, wasn't it? At that point?
Because basically, we were covering the BBC. When they had their full-time staff, they had to take leave at a certain time, and it was a time when there were about 60 full-time costume designers, which is an extraordinary amount and loads and loads and loads of assistants. And I was there solidly, practically for 3 years on a freelance basis, and it was an amazing time. I mean, it was never to be repeated, really.
No.
At that time.
And one of the things that we've said is that the whole training system or the learning process that the BBC offered at that point, whether it was formal or informal, indeed, just learning on the job and learning with talented designers and having to prove yourself was invaluable. And of course, it doesn't exist anymore, which is kind of why we think we need to do these sort of things.
Well, I
And,
agree, because I even not that long ago worked on they used to do a sort of BBC Enterprise scheme where, again, postgrad students would apply to get a bursary to work within the industry for a year or so. And I can remember we had at any one time had 700 applicants, and we had to whittle it down to about 20 portfolios, and then get down to the final 10. And then I think 3 people ended up with a bursary for a year where they get first-hand experience, they get design experience with working on production or working with various designers, and it was fantastic. And even that's gone now. So you're absolutely right. There is no real sort of interim from art school to the industry, and it's sort of baptism by fire, really.
It is, isn't it? I mean, and again, we always accept the fact that we'll get a number of people coming to work with us who will work with us for 2, 3, 4, 5 years or so, and then move on, which is the way it should be.
Yeah.
Obviously, we hope to keep staff and have a backbone of experienced staff. But
I mean, because there will be people that are very happy working within that that structure. They want to work from 9 till 5 days a week. They know the building, they know the stock, they know this, but they don't want to do those ridiculous filming hours, or they want the stability rather than I've got a job and then I might not work for 6 weeks or 6 months. I can totally understand that. Those that stay are invaluable. I mean, the people I've worked with and grown up, and again, there's lots of people who I had as trainees who are now fully established working on big major productions, but you sort of who you like to work with. You get a sort of sixth sense, really.
Because again, I mean, a team is important, isn't it? And
very much.
I'm thinking of you and Carly as a team for a long time, which worked very well. And
14 years or something like that. We started off, I think Carly came in as a friend of a friend to come and do dailies. And then we did another production where she was the assistant. And, we have a really good working relationship. And, she's gone on to bigger things, which is fantastic. I think, given the right project, we'd obviously, love to work together again. But, build up that relationship. And it's great. I'm very loyal to my team. And I think that, it's fantastic when you have a group of people that you can take from project to project, because you never know what's next, whether it's contemporary or period or sci-fi or whatever. So it's good. I think it's nice, because even now every job I do, you're learning something new and different and exciting.
Do you know, the one thing that comes across with these iPods talking to you guys is, a couple of things that come across. The first one is how nurturing you are, how all of you actually want to encourage people coming into the business and bring people on, which I think is extraordinarily generous, because I can imagine situations where people go, well, actually, I better watch this one, because otherwise the next time around, which is...
Sorry.
No. I was just going to say, I think that's fantastic, and I also think the other thing that comes across very strongly is just how exciting and enthused you are by the job, by what we do.
Yeah,
which is fantastic.
Oh no, I mean, it's God. I've been doing it so long. It's very, very easy to get jaded. I mean, the industry has changed a lot. We know that, and there are a lot of youngsters coming in that immediately sort of get their graduation and they want your job, and they get the apprenticeship that we all serve. Most of us, my generation, 3, 4, 5 years as an assistant, low boot polisher, working your way up, working with a variety of really established designers. And I think that, again, there's a lot of designers that, there's lots of people, I have no idea who they are, where they've come from. It's like, wow, suddenly, who's that on the credit? And I go, oh, interesting. And, in the same token, and I hope I don't want to get to that stage, but there's, there are other people that sort of hang on to the job. You sort of think, actually, just you should be kind to yourself and just go and have a nice retirement.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, I've
Yes.
been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, and maybe just go and enjoy, because it is stressful. It's got more complex. You're a project manager, you're an accountant, you're a psychologist, you're all of those things.
HR, yeah, computer expert, yeah, indeed.
So for me, it's key to have people that, I'm very hands-on, will wash socks the same as anybody else, if it means we get off the bus at the end of the day a bit earlier. But I like to feel that everyone has a role to play, that everyone has an input, and, you're all part of that bigger team, within the costume department. And then also you're part of that bigger team of, set and makeup and the whole sort of thing. It's a big old traveling circus, really.
Yes, it is. It is. And I think it is amazing that you actually do nurture your team in that way and recognize that, because I think certainly there are examples of people that really don't seem to have a huge amount of concern for the people that they're working with.
I agree, and I think that for me, I think that's terribly sad, because I think the whole part of doing the job. I mean, for me personally, when I get given a project, the most enjoyment I get out is doing the research, doing the mood boards, doing the designing. When you've got the luxury of putting pen to paper and actually sketching the thing out, then you go into the process of sampling and getting your fabrics and stuff, and that's when your team come on board. And I love doing crowd extras as much as I do the principals. I think you can get a real sense of, even though you're never going to, it's not really to be seen, it's just subliminal in the background, but if you have that input, and in that respect, your assistants can really have their bit of input in it and feel like they've been part of it.
Yeah, part of the creative design process. Yeah. When you first get a project, what sort of excites you? Is it the person? Is it the director? Is it the period? How does that work?
For me now, it has to be the script. And
right.
They come through the door, and I sort of know within the first 6 pages whether it's for me. I mean, I recently did a contemporary drama, Young Wallander, or Young Wallander, as it's called.
Wallander, yes, indeed. Yes.
The script, first 10 pages, because I got it and I went, oh no, contemporary police drama, me, really? Oh dear. Just read through and I went, oh my God, this is actually really good. And it was very clever and very, very good script. And that was a real departure, because I just spent the past 5-6 years going from Poldark to War of the World to my mainstay, Red Dwarf to Zapped, so from science fiction to period, strict period to period with a twist, that sort of thing. So very much more of my sort of theatre background, much more my comfort zone in a way. So it was good to push the boundaries and, to actually sort of put your mind into sort of contemporary clothing, because at the end of the day, it's all the same job. You're creating a character, you're finding out, and if somebody's wearing a particular coat or as a particular piece of jewelry, it's personal to that character. It's right. It's never, you don't want it to spring out, but it's part of their persona in a way. So you're doing the same job as if you're doing a period. Whereas period, you've got to do a bit more research. You've got to know what the look, the silhouette that you're trying to create, and then also you have your ideas, but then you've got to encompass the vision of the director and what he wants, and he may want period. But I mean, I've done so many productions, particularly sort of 1940s, and suddenly the director said, I don't want them wearing hats. I don't want them wearing hats outside. You think, really? She's in uniform, and you sort of go, well, that's your choice, and you can fight the battle, but you kind of that's kind of their vision. But all of the jobs that I, as I say, the recent ones, even like Dwarf, which I've been doing that. That was the first costume design job I ever did as a designer, and that was over 30.
Was it? I wasn't sure about that, because I know you've been associated with Dwarf for a long time. So that was your first kind of designer gig, was it?
I worked up in BBC Manchester for a costume designer called Inez Nordell, lovely Inez.
Yeah, I know it is.
And they had this sci-fi drama that it had the second season, but the viewing figures had gone down, and basically they were going to scrap it. So they had this third season, and basically the boys said, look, we want to redesign the whole thing, new sets, new costumes, blah blah blah. And of course, it was a gift. I mean, it was just to take the iconic characters, well, not even iconic at that point, but take the.
No, I was going to say. I mean, it was the three-handers. What on earth is this all about at first?
Cheap as chips. It was just trying to.
Yeah.
And I got all my old Wimbledon School of Art mates, and I can remember taking Lister's leather jacket around the car park, dragging it around, trying to break it down. And it was one of those jobs that, well, it was my first design, and I had no idea. I don't think any of us did the longevity of it, and how generations have come and grown up with it. And people, it's one of those jobs. It's a bit like Marmite; they either love it or hate it. And when my kids were little, Ollie used to call it, "Oh, Daddy, you're doing that Starbug program," and I used to think, and yet now, we went recently. Met Doug in the edit suite because he's applied and in fact just got into the London Screen Academy and the Brit School to do film studies. And it was so weird being at Pinewood with Doug in the edit suite with my 17-year-old son talking about the technique now, which is so sophisticated. And I sat back and thought, God, this is just really weird.
Yeah.
Hey, we were piggyback plastic and wobbly stuff.
Well, presumably you sort of models and flying on wires and all that stuff, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was one of those jobs, and it was getting towards the end of the BBC as it was. I mean, we used to do, Paul Jackson at the time was exec producer, and I remember we used to go for a read through at North Acton. I can't remember which serial it was, and then suddenly we'd get on a plane and fly to Manchester to do a pre-record day, a live studio, and then come back again. It was funny, 2 years later we were on an overnight bus, and then
well, you've got to keep the license fee payers happy somehow.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But because all like lovely Peter Ragg, who was the props, and Mel Bibby, production. Of course, they're no longer with us. So because I came in when Crichton. Season 3, when Crichton first became a real character.
Yeah.
They were all young kids. They were, one was living in a squat, one was doing this. We kind of grew up together. It's one of those weird things that when we come back, we're all old and uglier and very odd. And it's lovely, and people say, oh, you've been doing, I can't think of anyone else doing Dwarf. If they suddenly went, hey, we're going to do Red Dwarf the movie, and I was not part of anything, I'd feel gutted.
Yeah. It's very much yours, isn't it?
Yeah,
very much yours.
And and you can see, I recently my agent was nagging about I hadn't got a website. She said, "Oh, darling, you don't have a website there. You've got to have a website." And so with my teenage kids, Ollie and Kitty and Karen, we put together this website, which took it off the internet. And just finding pictures and reference of all the stuff, because you look on IMDb, and I always look and think, oh, I've done 45 credits. Oh yeah, that's interesting, But when you go back and look at the stuff, and then find the visuals of things you worked on, there's episodes certainly of Dwarf that they've shown on Dave. I can't even remember doing. I look and go, really? Did we do that?
Well, maybe it's a case of if you can't remember, if you can remember Red Dwarf, you weren't there. Perhaps it's like the rock and roll years, Howard.
Exactly. That'll be part of it.
I wanted to ask you about the Doctor Who bit as well, because you basically were the Peter Capaldi Doctor designer, weren't you?
I was. I mean, I came in at Matt Smith's last series.
Yeah.
In between, we did the 50th with lovely John Hurt, gorgeous John Hurt. And then, obviously, Peter came in as the new Doctor, and I launched the first series with him. So I did 3 years sort of holding the baton of Doctor Who. I mean, I loved Doctor Who. I mean, it was a terrific, again, very creative process, not an unlimited budget. People think, oh, you got so much money, but things are always tight. It's a BBC television budget. And every episode often offered different challenges. And as time went on, I'd be taking on more and more of the more prop costume, more robotic stuff, which had always gone out to Millennium or somebody else because it was just a cost thing. But yeah, it was really fun to be part of that, part of the Doctor Who sort of family for those 3 years. It was
yes. And I mean, I remember you talking to me at the time about the fact that you and he were discussing his look and what he wanted and
very much.
What you thought it should be, and that is very much a collaborative process, isn't it? Bringing the actor with you to your vision.
I mean, bizarrely, while I had some time off, and I went to help Phoebe de Gay on The Musketeers. I went out to help set up the dye room, the workshop, because we're old friends. And she said, "Oh, look, do you want to come out?" And of course, Peter was playing Richelieu in The Musketeers. And I happened to cover a photo shoot for Radio Times and the whole thing about the new Doctor, who it's going to be. And I think Rory Kinnear was top running for the role, and gone to various people. And I remember we did this photo shoot, and Peter in full costume sat in his chair and sort of looked and said, "So, do they know who the new Doctor is?" A terrible accent, by the way. And of course, I had no idea. And I said, "Look, Peter, I've got absolutely no idea. I didn't even know who Clara Jenna Coleman was going to be until I saw her on Breakfast News. That's how secret it all was." I said, "Oh, we don't know, but it's whoever gets it. I'm sure we'll find out." And a few weeks went on, and I think we were filming towards Matt's sort of finale episode. And it was going to be announced on the BBC who the new Doctor was. And it was a big thing. I think, was it a big football match or something? And there was an interval and they were going to announce who the new Doctor was. And I literally got a phone call 20 minutes before the time saying, "It is actually Peter Capaldi." And I remember, "Oh God, I hope I didn't say anything terrible."
Do you think he must have known then at that point? Do you think when he was like,
No, but he told me afterwards it was such a joy because the only person that knew was him and his agent had phoned him up. He couldn't even tell his family, couldn't tell anybody.
Gosh.
And she literally phoned up and said, "Hello, Doctor." So he knew he got the role. And he said it was so lovely to be able to talk to somebody about Doctor Who because it was a couple of weeks before this thing was announced. But yeah, Peter had really strong ideas. Obviously, it's such an iconic thing, and I have to say, of all the things I've ever designed, I don't think I've ever had so much attention on one particular costume ever in my life. Yeah. And I can remember, as part of the 50th, we were invited to Buckingham Palace, "Get you, Mrs." And there was a sort of party thing. And even there, I was approached by the head of BBC Drama or somebody. They said, "What's the look? What's the look?" He hadn't even thought about it at the time. And so, we went through a massive, massive process of trying on stuff from every costume house, every different look. We went to fashion designers. We went to obscure sort of sci-fi thing, references from the past. And it was a very interesting process, and not an easy one, I have to say.
So no real pressure then, Howard, on you at all?
Oh no, not at all. And it was one of those that we went down a certain path, and it just when the results came, it just didn't work, and let's leave it at that. So we actually had to redo the look I think I had 5 days to turn this thing around before the press launch of who the new Doctor was with the new look, so on and so forth. And it's, in hindsight, you look back and think, "Oh, would I have done that? Or should we have done this?" Blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's something that comes and goes, and it evolves, and it changes, and you put your mark on it, and you move on. And I mean, Doctor Who was brilliant. I loved working on the 50th. John Hurt, again, was a fantastic actor to work with. And, I didn't realise he was ill at the time. I don't think any of us did. But he didn't want to travel over for a fitting, and so I literally took a rail of stuff down, and we kind of stuff I'd had made, and and we sort of threw this thing together on the day. It was the day before we started filming, and we found this sort of war horse, sort of soldiery kind of look, and he loved it, and it was brilliant. And I remember he said afterwards, he said, "Good, now I know what I look like. I better go and learn my lines." It was a bit more colourful, but he was brilliant. And that whole thing of creating Gallifrey, again, through fresh eyes, through somebody bringing it to the table. But yeah, it was great. There were fantastic episodes. And of course, it was funny because I mentioned I worked with June Hudson, the first designer I ever worked with. And we both, about 2 years ago, were invited to LA to Gallifrey. This, I think I may have told you, this weekend event of Doctor Who madness. And it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary, the amount of work that people put into cosplay and just the whole sort of bandwagon that goes along with it. Much bigger in the States, I think. But yeah, gosh. And I think one of my proudest, can I say that? Yeah. I remember when we did there was a concert at the Royal Albert Hall. It was the 50th anniversary tribute to Doctor Who. And I can remember arriving, they were rehearsing, and the massive screen was up, and the orchestra were just, Royal Philharmonic, I think, they were playing Doctor Who theme tunes around, and there was all this. I remember sitting there and I got quite emotional. It was just weird seeing the work on such a big screen with this orchestra, and I thought, it just doesn't get any better than that, really.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
it really is.
Really
fun. And that theme tune, I mean, instantly recognisable and iconic.
Yeah.
As soon as those first two WDums come in, you know where you are.
Exactly. I tell you, it was funny though, because I remember leaving that night, and there was a massive crowd waiting for Matt Smith to come out. So we sort of went out through the back door, and I went down South Ken on the tube, and someone had got a program with pictures, and there was I could just see a picture of me on this program, which is red. And this bloke opposite kept sort of looking at me, and I was thinking, oh, a bit odd, a bit strange, and went all the way to Wimbledon, and I kept getting this look. And as we got out the tube in Wimbledon, this stalker, bless him, not a stalker, got out and he went, "Excuse me, are you Howard Burden?" I went, "Yeah." He went, "I really admire your work on Doctor Who." And I was like, "No."
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Really. Thankfully, he went up the hill and I went down. So
yeah. Let's leave it like that. Yeah. Thank you very much for the nice things. Yes, it's you, isn't it? Yes, it's definitely me. You mentioned the costume houses again. How important is that relationship to you? I know you make a lot, and I know that various things that Doctor Who monsters and Red Dwarf things aside, you're known for making costumes, but the rental side.
You can't do the job without it. You really can't. And the thing what I mentioned before about having a hands-on about, extras and things. I mean, every job you do, whatever period you do, you have to get to know that stock. You have to re-look at that stock. And sometimes you can go up and down the rails and go, oh, there's nothing. And then you have to go back again and go, oh, well, maybe this could work, or maybe if we change this, I mean, I love putting together, me, I like to have a space upstairs and get rails of rags and put together stuff, even on the Gallifrey Doctor Who, putting together the most incredible, weird, sort of eclectic mix of stuff. And I love the costume houses. I think that you're never short of inspiration. Things will crop up. You'll find something out of the blue that will suddenly spin you off. I mean, even when I was doing Poldark, I remember finding Angharad Rees' original dress from Poldark back in the 70s and taking photos of it and going, oh my God, this is so weird. And what else? Oh, there was another. I think when I was doing Dad's Army, the lost episode.
Yes.
Oh my God. We were obviously with the army, the uniform, utility army uniform, because originally the series that we were replacing they were black and white, and it was
Yeah.
before they got their proper uniform. But we're also a mishmash of uniforms and getting. Obviously, you've got to do the badges and the ranking and corporal chains. All that stuff has got to be researched and done properly. And so that was fun. But then there were scenes that involved civilian clothing and trying to recreate things from the past. And there was obviously one scene where Captain Mannering was in his tweed suit and he had his gas mask and he turns up, corporal chains, blah, blah, blah. And I was pulling together again because it was tight, no prep time hardly, and it was tight budget. And we were putting together these suits, and I found this 3-piece suit that actually wasn't technically in the 40s section. I think it was probably a bit later, but it was going to fit. And I thought we can fudge the edges. We're not making a documentary. I need a 3-piece tweed suit. This one happens to be not in the right period section, but I like it. Put it on the rail, and I remember looking and checking out the sizing, so on and so forth. And I remember turning to Carly, saying, "Oh my gee, look at this!" And inside the label was obviously the Arthur Lowe Dad's Army, and it was from the Dad's Army movie.
It was the film, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was the film.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, this is just in the lap of the gods. And I took this suit to the fitting and put on the actor and said, "You're never going to believe this," and showed him. And he's since retold the story many times, that it's, which is weird. It was one of those really fruitful sort of things.
It's quite spooky, actually, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, no. I mean, I do quite often come across things that I did years ago that are in the rails there. Things I worked on at the BBC, old Scarlet Pimpernel stuff, because you go back to that period, you're looking at stuff that's there that every designer has put in, and occasionally you go, "Oh, this looks quite familiar. I like the look of this. Oh, of course, it was one of mine."
Mine. Yeah. I do like the fact that designers still refer to them as one of mine. And go, well, actually, strictly speaking, it's ours, but yes, we'll let you rent it again. That's not a problem. And you're right, what you said earlier about John Bloomfield's costumes from Henry.
Yeah. I can spot John Bloomfield cozies 20 paces. I admire his work, always have done. And
yes. And what a nice guy. I mean, he and Anne.
Yeah, I saw them a couple of years back. I think it was at a cozy function thing. And we were sort of, you still got to reminisce, because we're talking now 40 years ago, back at college.
They came to that exhibition we had in Brick Lane. That was the last time I think I saw John.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a pub in the country.
Oh, I think he's got 2 actually. Yeah.
Yes.
No, a couple of times I've stopped asking, but a couple of times they've been looking for designers, and I've said to John, "Are you interested?" No. And I think, like you said earlier again, Howard, it's time to when it's time to stop.
Yeah, no, I mean, because when we were at college, he was doing Waterworld and working on major big productions.
Yeah.
Working for Dino De Laurentiis, where you were sort of held to ransom by the studio. And
Flash Gordon.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you sort of, but I think there does come a time where, that whole getting up at 4:30 and doing those long weeks of shooting, I think does take its toll, particularly if you've got a family and you sort of think, actually, why am I doing this? I'm doing this ultimately so that we can, people, don't get me wrong, I think it's a fantastic job, but I think the parameters have changed so much that one has to adapt, and you've really got to keep that spark and the enjoyment going, because there are far too many people in the industry that just moan for Britain, and you just go, why do you do it? Why put yourself through it? Don't, just go and do something else, have a nice life. But all the time we're enjoying it. I think that's the key thing.
I think you're absolutely right. I think as long as it's fun,
yeah, totally,
keep on doing it. And as long as you can approach everything with an enthusiasm and a sort of a fresh eye and go, yeah, this is a new challenge. Looking forward to this one. The hours you do are grueling. I mean, all of you, that it's crazy times.
Yeah.
And I suppose the only thing is that that it's going to happen for a finite amount of time, and then you will stop whether you want to or not. You'll be stopping for a little while.
No, exactly.
So,
And I think anyone. I mean, my children are sort of 12 and 17, so they're heading toward. But I still got to keep working. I should be carrying on till I'm probably in my bath chair.
poking people irritably with your stick, going, "That's not right. Change
I'd love to be around angels in a bath chair with a stick."
And I do have to say that it's great, because you sort of pop your head in my office and go, right, I'm just here to pull out about 10 sort of townsfolk love. It shan't be very long. I probably need them booking out in a couple of hours' time.
Yeah.
And in 2 hours' time, there's a rail of costumes complete with the accessories, and you've been in and done it. You haven't sent somebody in to do it. You've actually been in to do it yourself.
It's like it's the years and years. I mean, things get moved around, but in a way, that's a bit like Marks and Spencer. You go to where the frozen peas are, and you think, the frozen peas always used to be here. Why aren't they here? That means you've got to go and look for. But it's getting a sort of map. But it's just getting to. You kind of have a sixth sense. You know that stock. You begin to, over the years and years, you get to know that stock. Things come in, go out. I've quite often gone in looking for a specific item that I remember seeing, going, oh, where's that coat? I know it's down here somewhere, blah, blah, blah. And that's the weird sort of thing. So when you're doing a certain period, you kind of know where the strengths are and
the key pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And I've certainly done things where I think it was War of the Worlds. They wanted to do a reshoot 6 weeks weeks and weeks after we finished.
I remember.
Oh my God! And it was like the most amazing jigsaw puzzle of putting together items that had all gone back in the ethers. Just extraordinary. But you're tenacious. You go through. Yeah, it is something you have to spend time there. That's the thing. And I think a lot of youngsters they spend a lot of time, quite rightly, on their laptops and their iPads, and I do find that quite frustrating at times, because you sort of think it's all here, it's all on a rail somewhere, and they want to buy everything on the internet. And I go, it just kind of doesn't work. You need to get in there, because you're going to find something down those rails. You think, oh, there's nothing there. There'll always be something, even if it's a base on which you can work on.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, actually, how the whole sort of concept of, we'll go out and buy it. I'm not 100% convinced in many instances you can go out and buy it in the right size and the right colour and the right condition that you want. But,
no, it's not possible. It's very interesting when we're allowed back to work, the whole process of sampling and getting fabrics and getting clothes and doing returns. This is a whole new ball game that we're going to go into.
Yeah,
indeed. Like you guys, I mean, how does one take 50 period costumes and do this whole thing of health and safety? One has to use common sense, but at the end of the day, it's one can only do what one can do. Abide by certain health and safeties, but you can't take a period Elizabethan frock and wash it overnight and keep it in isolation for 72 hours.
No, exactly right. Well, I was talking to Jill Taylor earlier, and she said she thinks it might be, if it slows things down a little bit, if it slows the process down, it can only be a good thing. Just give us all a little bit more time to kind of think about this.
I absolutely agree. I think she's hit the nail on the head, because what was happening is that with the explosion of Netflix and Sky and the big sort of money people, there was so much. It was quantity, not quality. And I think that you need that sort of additional, you need your 10 weeks to do the design concept, to know what you're looking for, to pull the stock, to see where the gaps are, to look further afield, to actually go through that whole sort of process. Whereas, we were getting down to okay, you've got like sort of 4 weeks and you've got to pull it out the bag, and I know you will, because that's what you do. And the whole thing of casting the night before, I mean, classic. You get actors turn up on a train to Bristol the night before, you do a fitting, and they'd be on camera the next day. And that's why you had to have a massive amount of stock to draw on, because you literally, you're pulling stuff together as you go along. So, yeah, it'll be interesting, very interesting.
It will. But I think what you've said about the whole people learning their craft, and it isn't just a case of looking up stuff on the internet or looking at Pinterest images, some of which I think I have to say need to be treated with a great deal of caution. One of my concerns is that we're getting pictures of reenactors' uniforms and they're being sort of taken as correct ones, and you can't do that. You can't.
No, Pinterest and all of those, they're brilliant because they're your library of that immediate. And I can find an image that will send me off to something else that will give me some sort of creative stimulus. But you've got to know the period. You've got to know your basics. You need to sort of know those silhouettes. You've got to know the shapes. You've got to know the sort of texture. You can use those facilities on the internet that will help, but they're not the answer. You're absolutely right, because you can come a cropper, and they're not it's not the gospel. And yes, if there seems to be a real trend for what I hate, period with a twist, where it's
period with a twist.
Well, don't do it. Don't do. Why do it period at all? It just doesn't comprehend. So there's a big sort of in vogue for that. But if you're going to do something, yes, reinterpret it, see it with your own eyes, but you've got to go back to the basics. You need to go and look at those paintings, look at the whole body, look at real images. I mean, I always think original photographs for me are my gospel. I love original photos. They only go down to a certain period. Beyond that, you look at your paintings, and your paintings are rich, gentry, and posh people, and so you'll have an idea of the poor or hand-me-downs. I always tell people, when we do a period, you can go back 30, 40, nearly 50 years of older stuff because it's hand-me-down. It would have happened until it fell apart.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no buying it for this season and then getting rid of it and buying another set for the next season.
No, not at all. And with a lot of most costume houses, there will be things in there that you will look at and go, really? But then back in the 1970s, when this stuff was being made and it was pioneering, great, it was absolutely right then. It's not right now.
Yes, you're talking about the furnishing fabric, dresses, and
all of that. So you're not making a documentary; you're making a drama. You're giving a feel and essence. But essentially, the costume should be irrelevant almost. It's about the performance. It's finding the character, and you're kind of just helping along that process.
Yeah. Now, you and I are both hoping that Ollie gets a real job so he can employ us in our twilight years. But if either of your two did decide that they want to do what Dad does, what one piece of advice, just one piece of advice? I mean, you've touched on so many pieces, but what one piece of advice would you give them, Howard?
Oh God, I think you need to learn from everybody you work with. You can learn something. You can take something from whatever job you do and use it to your advantage, because I think there's a wealth of talent, there's a wealth of experience out there, and you can't get experience like off the internet, off the page. Stories, ideas, inspiration. Just you're like they need to be like a sponge. They need to just absorb and then go off on their own.
Yeah. And you've said earlier that you have people that have come in as juniors and you've seen them move on, and again, our role partly, both in-house and out-house, is nurturing, isn't it? It's bringing on the youngsters and the people who are coming into the industry.
Well, exactly, and it's across the board. It's like I think of all the talented, all those people that I grew up with, all the the Miss Rules who dyed feathers. People with a misconception of that, of this woman up in the attic with this cauldron with a cigarette and just, making the most amazing things. All these talented tailors and hat makers. And all the all those places that used to go, I'd be sent off dispatched to, go and buy some buttons. So you go off to various, like the Button Queen or whatever, that are no longer there. All these people that, I don't know if they're there, but several of these suppliers have ceased to exist. And a lot of those fantastic technicians aren't there anymore. And it's, there is very much that sort of factory mentality of you're part of a small cog in a big chain, big, and you've got to churn it out. Whereas there was a wealth of talent. And I think nurturing that is key to the future of this industry. Otherwise, it will be, we'll just all ship it in from China, and we'll get it mass produced elsewhere, or they'll just CGI crowd scenes and so on and so forth. But that's not going to work.
No, I completely agree with you. I think, and it is sad that so many of those little niche businesses that used to exist around Soho and the West End, and indeed the East End there, have just gone, haven't they? It's just...
No, it's absolutely true. And even with stock, you look at the stock, and there's a lifespan to it. And within probably 20 years, all those 1940s frocks will just be rotten. They won't be, you won't ever use them because they're made of polyester or silk, and they've just rotted. They're not wrapped in paper. They've had a life, and you can't buy that stuff. You can't replace it anymore because there are a few dealers that will, but they're very expensive. But not that scale of stuff. All those 30s dresses. So there's whole periods of things that you think, so when we do big 1930s, there will have to be a lot more makes because they're too fragile, the stuff, the original.
Well, and of course, size is another thing we've not discussed.
Exactly that. I mean, I've got friends recently who worked on sort of 1970s, 80s productions, and all these young actors, these gym bunnies that come out, just can't get the bodies in them. They're too tiny. It's all the proportions. We're a different sort of shape altogether. So that has a huge sort of bearing on your work, really.
Yes, yeah. Well, so to sum up, it ain't getting any easier. We still love it, and wouldn't choose anything else. Did anybody, just curious, in careers, was anybody trying to steer you into this, or did they all want you to go do insurance or banking? Or
no, I used to. I did a foundation at Maidstone College of Art.
Right, but before that, when you were at school, I mean...
I was always into drama, and I was really torn between following the drama school or the art school thing. I was involved with a lot of theatre productions, did a lot of... there was a lovely lady called Rosemary Hawthorne who used to do these period fashion shows, and I was involved with that. And I was torn between acting, and then of course at that stage, no, it's very unstable. Follow the theatre, design, and it just seemed the natural progression. And I quite often look at my passport and when look at the profession, I think, how did that happen? It was by design. So no, it was kind of always there. I always knew I wanted to be part of it.
Well, that's great, because quite often in these things, people are saying, "Well, I had no idea this existed, and I didn't know that you could do these things." And I think it was Giles Gale said, my careers advisor told me to go into banking, and that was kind of what they wanted. So it's great that you actually identified that early and pursued it. And I think the world of acting's lost something, Howard. I mean, you've done 3 impressions in the course of this, and they work for me.
Dressing up as a child.
Listen, this has been great. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
It's been such a pleasure.
No, I appreciate it. All of the people that I'm talking to, the enthusiasm and the love of the business is coming across, and I think that's so important, so important. If you're in this as a job, you think you're going to earn money, you might earn some money, but you really won't enjoy it.
I know, exactly, and it's and in this time off I think it's been healthy. It's been a really healthy time to reevaluate, to sort of think about. I'm gagging to get back to work. Hopefully Wurzel, we're hoping... Yes,
we didn't even talk about Wurzel, did we?
I mean, we hope to start prepping in about 4 weeks, and it's BBC have commissioned 4 1 hours, but we were going to do 2, but I think we'll just do 1 because of the logistics of crowds and social distancing stuff. But we fingers crossed we will do that, and it's for Christmas. We did a showed on Boxing Day last year, so it'll be a new Wurzel Gummidge for Christmas,
Nice.
which is brilliant. And I'm very happy to be stuck out in the field, social distancing from everybody.
I'm so glad you talked about Red Dwarf with Howard. It's something I've always loved, and it's something I've just always known that's Howard's. I know he didn't do the first 2 seasons, but whenever I see Dwarf, I always think of it's a Howard show.
Yeah, and it's very, very obvious that Howard thinks it's a Howard show as well, which is which is absolutely right. I mean, it's quite interesting what he says about them all sort of getting older. The rock and roll years are probably gone now. But
Well, you build up a relationship. It's a bit like the relationship that Hazel Pethick has with the Monty Python group,
yes,
and
yes.
then therefore a shorthand is established quite early on, and you're able to respond appropriately to the requirements rather than constantly having to. It doesn't become. It's not a political issue. It's more collaborative.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm very interested in the class of whatever it was, 1980 something, in terms of who came out of Wimbledon at that time, and what the students on that year have subsequently gone on to achieve, of which Howard is one of them. And I think that it reflects well on various schools at various points in their in terms of the education structure, and who is teaching in those colleges at that particular time, and then subsequently who comes out of that and then goes on to achieve acclaim and fame.
Yeah, it's like a sort of burst of talent, isn't it? Just sort of going push, and there they are from that particular era.
And Hornsey had a moment, and Royal College had a moment, and it's. I think it must be down to who's teaching as well as funding.
Yeah, and inspiring. Yes.
What I got from the interview, which is like when you see him as well, is just how happy and how much enjoyment he gets out of doing it. He's always happy to be pulling, and he's always happy to be doing something with costume. It's always great to see him. He's just a very infectiously happy person most of the time.
Yeah, and I've said this before about other people, but again, he's one of those sort of people that I'm sure he can go, and when he goes, it must be quite scary. But generally, he seems fairly sort of placid, and of course he's internally stressed, and he's up against it. But most of the time, he seems fairly sort of serene, doesn't he? Maybe we just have that calming effect.
Or maybe he thinks we need to see that. Yeah,
it's that feely way that we've got in the diffusers.
And I did like as well that, as Amy mentioned in your interview with Amy, again about just the pressure with the Doctor Who fans that come along, and about the amount of people who suddenly know who you are just because of that TV series, which is quite incredible, and so much so that someone followed him home almost.
Well, yes, I loved his bit about he went up the hill and I went down the hill at Wimbledon. So that was enough.
And he's done some iconic TV, and everyone, as you even mentioned, Dad's Army, the new series. He did Poldark, Wurzel Gummidge, Red Dwarf. We've already mentioned Doctor Who. He did Robin Hood as well, and he's done some incredible projects over the years, and he's always lovely to work with. It was a great interview. Really enjoyed it. And the next interview we are going to be releasing is my interview with Matt Price. Matt Price is a costume designer. He started off as a costumier at Angels in the contemporary department. Was there with Nat, Bart, who we've already spoken to, and I think Ian Fulcher was there as well. It was a great conversation. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about a few of the things Matt worked on and his take on things. So I hope you'll enjoy it. And here is a small extra of my conversation with Matt Price.
I mean, it was quite daunting, number one, because you kind of think, is it too soon to touch on this subject? But really, with the story kind of based from Dominic Cummings' point of view to a degree, I don't think a lot of people had really heard too much about him at the time. Obviously, now he's in the news every other day, as it were. But so there was a certain sensitivity to how we approach that. And you could almost look at a project like that and just say, well, it's just men in suits, really. But actually, all those characters wear their clothes for specific reasons. You've only got to look at someone like Farage, for example, with the sort of the 90s bank manager look that he's got. It's everything is sort of contrived within the wardrobes of those guys. There's a narrative within the clothing, and it's I think it really shows in that piece as well. Really, just the sort of the fine touches within each character. They're all there for a reason, basically. And even if you're playing with characters that that you have the footage of these characters, it doesn't mean that you can't tweak them in that moment.